drawing my hands. Welcome, cult members. Welcome, cult members. Hello, cult members, and welcome to Pop Culture Cult. I'm Sean.
I'm Janice.
I've had a shit day, and Star Wars just makes me happy.
Yay!
A lot of people have talked about Star Wars as a whole and how it is it's crap, and Lucasfilm doesn't know what they're doing. Kathleen Kennedy doesn't know what they're doing, and the thing that kept me going today with all this stuff that happened was that we get to see Andor on screen, but we get to live in this universe for 45 minutes. And now my brain hurts because this episode was bonkers. And bonkers in a way I don't think any of us expected it to be bonkers, because nothing really happened.
Right.
Welcome to our discussion. We just watched the episode. We're going to do spoilers. And so we're going to react after what we just saw. And so our conversation goes everywhere. So if you're looking at a scene by scene breakdown, New Rockstars just had a really good video, and Eric was wrong on one of the pieces, but that's okay. We'll let it slide. He can't be perfect all the time. All right, so let's get into this episode. The whole flight with Luthen and Andor about, even though the recruitment Andor's on the ship, Luthen is still trying to recruit.
Right. Because, I mean, and he points it out, you have two, well, really three options.
Right.
You can join us, I can let you off somewhere and you can continue to run, or you can kill me and try to take the ship, although I don't think the robot eye thing is going to let that happen.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, he's like, you can stick it to the man and make some money at the same time.
And the trying to, I'll say it, he's bribing him to ultimately join the rebellion. But at this point, Cassian isn't ready to join the rebellion at all, because he even points out he was on Minbani fighting against themselves, and then Luthen pointing out, you're a cook and then you deserted, so I don't want to hear you that you were fighting on the ground.
Right.
But he's like, Cassian said, you're a separatist, you're a rebellion, you're alliance, you're all these different things. It doesn't matter what you call yourself. You're all crap to me because of everything that's happened to me.
Right. But then Luthen turns around and throws it in his face that the rope isn't gonna kill you any more or any less. That's not exactly what he said. If it's over this box, or
20 million credits.
200, 20 million credits.
Yeah,
So maybe make it worth a little bit more than, just whatever he was going to get for that box.
Yeah. And I like that approach from Luthen. I'm going to get into my theory about who Luthen is when we get towards the end here, but I just like his approach of, I know a lot more about you than you think you know, that you think you know about yourself. And him pointing out that, Cassian throws it out there that, I was on Minbom, and he's like, you were a cook, and then you deserted. Like you ran away from the situation, and now you're just going to try to run away again?
Well, he's had this, bravado, or this, not a stigma, but like this kind of almost false past that he could, nobody knows, and he's a thief, and he's, this is what he does, so he can lie or exaggerate what his past was, and there was nobody's gonna challenge him because nobody knows except maybe his mom,
or Bix from the.
Yeah, but I don't even know if she. I mean, we don't really know how much she knows.
No, but
about.
She even made a point in the last episode, or the last couple episodes, about pointing out to him that you can't keep doing this. You can't keep going on this trajectory that you're on.
Right. But he's got this persona that he is, showing to everybody, in this town that he was in, and getting by, sort of. And Luthen knows the truth about all this stuff and has the perspective of somebody from the outside looking in, so he can, not only go, no, you're kind of exaggerating what actually happened there and pointing that stuff out, but then also, he's got the outside perspective, so he can kind of look at the situation and go, well, this is why he's doing this, and this is why he, and kind of almost manipulate him into, joining the rebellion by pushing buttons that not necessarily everybody else knows about.
Yes, that, but he's also looking for somebody like Cassian.
Oh yeah, he wouldn't waste that kind of time.
Yeah, and
if he wasn't what he needed.
You think I would you think I would have risked my ass over a stupid box?
Yeah.
I was here for you because I need somebody like you to help me stick it to these guys.
Right.
And that whole kind of conversation of trying to talk Cassian into joining Luthen leads them to Aldalhe. How do we decide we were going to pronounce it?
Aldahani.
There you go. Welcome to the show, guys. I can't speak. And so he's got a crew on site who's been working there for a year to get ready for this heist, and he's throwing Cassian in 3 days before the end. And this whole group of characters are set up to steal the quarterly payroll of the Imperial sector. Not just the planet, not just the facility that's there, but the whole sector, to steal from them, from the Empire. And from my point of view, from where I sit right now, I think this is the seed money for the proper a proper rebellion.
Right.
Because at this point in time, it's all tiny little cell. We're 5 years BBY. And so, before the Battle of Yavin. And so, the rebellion is not really a thing. There's people rebelling.
Right.
But there's not an organized group.
There are multiple organized groups. There's somewhat organized.
There's not one big entity together.
Right.
It's a bunch of little groups doing stuff, which is why we're going to get Saw later, because his whole group of doing terrorist attacks,
right,
that actually will have Jin Urso as part of that whole thing. We won't see Jin, I don't think, in the show. If we do, it'll be a 15, 16-year-old Jin. But
I mean, Cassian's not going to necessarily know who she is, because he doesn't know who she is when Rogue One happens.
Right. So there might be if we get to that point, there'll be a scene where, Saw is with his people, and there's a 14, 15-year-old dark-haired girl standing there. We're all going to go, that's Jin.
Right.
But to everybody in the show, it doesn't really mean anything yet.
Right.
But this whole heist, from Luthen's point of view, is a proper test run for Cassian to see if he can handle what really needs to happen for the rebellion.
So, just sitting here talking about this, I'm thinking how this timing is very interesting, and how the only reason that Biggs called Luthen was because Cassian was in, he had his back up against the wall, and he had to get rid of this box that he'd actually been holding on to as his ace in the hole for quite some time. And then conveniently, 3 days before this heist, he suddenly has to get rid of it, which makes me wonder. I mean, that's just interesting timing.
I said it when they introduced the ISB and they had the whole ISB conversation, which I'm going to get into too. But Deidre, Deidre Miro, pointed out that that box was stolen from her sector.
Yeah.
And that the other gentleman found it in his sector, and she fought and fought and fought and fought to take over the case.
Right.
I think she's the one who set that up all on purpose for Luthen. That's where I sit right now. I know that there's been conversations about who she actually is and what, if she's really the big bad in this series or whatever. But from what they presented to us in this episode specifically, it very much feels like somebody in the ISB is fighting very hard to make sure that that box is taken out of the records of the Empire, just to cover some tracks for what Luthen is trying to do to get Cassian to be part of this heist that will lead to the rebellion.
Right.
That's what it feels like from where I sit right now. But again, we're 4 episodes in, and there's 12 episodes in this season.
Right.
So there might be a lot of look over here, look over here, look over here, and the whole time it's somebody else.
Right.
Which is a very Star Wars thing, too.
Yeah.
It's also a very Star Wars thing to have an Imperial switch sides to the Rebellion because they get in, they just think they're getting a really cool job, and they realize once they get in that job that the Empire is crap and treating everything like crap.
Right.
And so it's just one of those. It's a Star Wars trope that I really appreciate. I really like. So because it gives credibility to people who are brainwashed or seduced or convinced that this is the right thing, which is something that happens in the real world, and then that person goes through the process and actually sees the proper horrors that are going on.
Right.
And they have a chance to feel remorse and find their true path.
It also keeps you guessing.
Yeah.
Right? You never know who is on what side.
Right. Let's talk about the ISB stuff for a minute. Now, ISB is essentially Eric and New Rockstars called them like the FBI, CIA of the Empire, and they're much more of internal affairs. They are the ones who actually hold the Empire accountable. Imperial officers and members of the army accountable for things that they do. And so if something goes wrong, ISB is the ones who are called. One of my favorite characters is a gentleman. Oh my God, his name just left. Hi, John. What's his name? Oh, it's right there. From the Aftermath series, who is the Aftermath books, who is an ISB officer, and during the Battle of Yavin and all that time period, and he is gay, and the Empire doesn't recognize people have that kind of proclivity, and he was the guy you called to be like, he was the super interrogator. If he showed up, you were in a lot of trouble, that kind of thing. And then he realized what the Empire really was, and so now he joins this Nazi hunting group post Empire Strikes, or Revenge of the Return of the Jedi. They all start to run together, and so ISB is like the big oogie boogie monster for the Empire, and the Empire's, of course, the big bad. And so them introducing the ISB in that whole big white room, and everybody's wearing white, and Qyburn is the head of,
right.
of the whole thing.
Star Wars brought to you by Game of Thrones this episode.
Right. Because, what was her name?
Val?
Laura? Val, you're right. Who is the waif in Game of Thrones.
Right.
So they filmed a bunch in the UK, so they just hired all the
right. The Highlands of Scotland, to be exact.
Right. So pretty there. Qyburn's whole thing. His name isn't Qyburn, but you can't not call him Qyburn because he's Qyburn. Like, his sentences are like bang, 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 bang. Like, he doesn't stop to take a breath. He doesn't have time to mess around with stuff, and he has no time for your insolence or your inability to get stuff done, or whatever. And when Deirdre brings it to him that she should be in charge of going to find this box, he's real short with her and dismisses the other guy and says, "You need to shut up. He's doing his job. He's got 6 sectors and he's covering it. You're covering 2." But there's a scene in there at the end or a sentence in there at the end where he's like, there was a reason you were put in this position. There's a reason that you were placed here away from everything else. Don't make us regret that we made this decision. It was very odd, like, wording wise, from my point of view. Again, like, almost like he could be somebody who is working for Deidre, who's also working for Lutheran, kind of like that whole kind of thing, right?
Right. So they pulled strings somewhere to bring her in here from the field into the home office from a field office or whatever to get her closer to what they're trying to do. Or
try and have another set of eyes, another set of trusted eyes to kind of direct the whole thing from one point of view, and then he can kind of direct it and from another point of view. Again, it's a story trope that people have used. There's a hidden, unknown ally in a higher position, and so that kind of it was very odd to me that conversation, the way it was handled, and I'm just projecting. It's all it really is. Let's talk about Mon Mothma gets here. Yay! We finally get Mon Mothma.
Yay!
And she's so first we have to talk about Luthen doing the costume change.
Yeah.
And actually putting on his cosplay.
Yeah.
His real self is when he went off to get Cassian and stuff like that, but his facade, his costume, his persona that he puts on is who he is on Coruscant.
Right.
And Mon Mothma shows up to his shop, and his shop is a shop of antiquity.
Right.
Okay. We have to talk about their conversation first before we get into what was actually in that room. The conversation that they have that she has a new driver, which was pointed out by Luthen's assistant, who is in on the conversation.
Right.
They have a very public conversation in front of the driver about all these different types of things for her husband, and then they go in the back, and then Luthen's assistant grabs the driver to distract him to show him a bunch of coins and whatever. And then in the back, Mon Mothma and Luthen have this whole conversation about bringing somebody new into the circle of what's going on.
Right. That she wants to bring in.
Yes.
And he's concerned, which is funny because he just did the same thing, but...
And that's where I was going. It's a little hypocritical that Luthen doesn't trust her to bring somebody else in, and yet he's trying to bring somebody in without telling her.
Well, and as she points out, she's got the most to lose if this goes bad, because she's out there in front. You know, he's going to potentially have some time to get away.
And the means.
Right. And she's right out there in front. Like, she's just going to get killed.
They won't. At this point in time in the Empire, the trial will be very short, and she will be publicly removed from life.
Right.
And I know where it goes with Mothma and Rebels and everything. I kind of talked about that in the new Rockstars thing. But the tension between the two of them and the tension of the misdirection conversation that they have out in front is why we're all here for this show. Yes, we're here for Andor. We're here for what Cassian is doing, how he becomes a proper spy for the rebellion and the building of the rebellion and stuff like that. But the ultimate cat and mouse, speaking in code, misleading who's really on whose side, that whole thing is why this show exists.
Right.
And what Tony Gilroy, as a director of this kind of genre of stuff wanted to do this show.
Right. It's a spy drama thriller.
Yeah. That's a really good way of putting it, because although we have some, laugh kind of comedy beats, it's a drama. This is a drama series.
Yep.
It's a spy series. But their tension that they have the whole time is just on the edge of your seat, and there's no action going on.
Right.
And it's not even like a ton of dialogue. We all know from our knowledge of Star Wars as the fans of what's at stake in this conversation.
Right.
And the one little slip of the tongue, the driver's going to hear it, and he's going to report back to ISB or whoever he's reporting to.
Right.
And
right.
So that tension is a lot of fun.
Yep.
In the antiquity shop, oh my God, Tony Gilroy, we're not going to have any Easter eggs. We're not going to do anything. They mentioned Scarif. They mentioned
Saw.
I mean, we know Saw's coming from the trailer.
Right.
Membon, Mowabi from the previous episode, the prison planet where Jen is actually on at the beginning of Rogue One.
Right.
Like that kind of stuff. So then in this antiquity shop, it looks like Plo Koon's race face mask kind of hidden in a corner. I'm going to say it's Plo Koon's because I have a theory about Luthen. But his mask is there. There's a Beskar armor there. There's Star Killer's armor in the back. There's a Gungan shield in there. There's Malakari from Ryloth. They talked about Ryloth in this episode. Hashtag justice for Ryloth, free Ryloth. So there's all this stuff in there that is talked about in this episode, and a ton of stuff that they brought into from Legends into this episode. Thank you, New Rockstars, for pointing some of the stuff out that we didn't know. For me, the biggest thing was the 3 tablets with the hands. Now, this is where I think Eric was wrong. And New Rockstars talked about these 3 tablets, that they looked like the directional things that the Jedi Temple on Lothal that opens the gateway to the cartoons get weird. Clone Wars and Rebels gets weird. But it's a gateway to the world beyond worlds, which is how we get Ahsoka back. Ask Dave Filoni. It makes complete sense when Dave says it. If I do it, I'm just going to stumble over my words. But those 3 tablets look like the hands from Mortis. And Mortis is such a huge part of the story of the Force. Like I said, Clone Wars at times gets really weird and talking about the mysticism of the Force. The fact that these 3 tablets are there and look like pieces from the Mortis Temple opens up a whole bag of worms for live-action Star Wars. To bring the whole Mortis arc into Star Wars in live action opens up a bevy of conversations about the mysticism of the Force, the religion of the Force, and the Jedi, and all of that. And it is something that's going to be addressed in the Ahsoka series. It's going to be addressed. And from my point of view, from where I currently sit, placing these here in an antiquity shop that's kind of just a room full of cool stuff, those of us who know what the Mortis arc is are going to tell people who don't know what the Mortis arc is and explain it to them, so when they get to Ahsoka, because we all feel like that's where the Ahsoka series is going to lead us, is to the Mortis stuff, it makes that conversation easier. It's what Marvel just did with What If to introduce the multiverse.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
And so that's a ton of stuff. Great episode. I love this stuff. That, for me, the Mortis arc and the whole philosophy behind the Force and everything, that's Star Wars for me. Yes, this stuff is really a lot of fun, and Rogue One's my favorite because it's a heist movie and stuff, but that's where I get like nerd chills and just And I'm trying to think of anything else that's like majorly important. There's a ton of other people who are going to have lots of information about legends and like kind of the storytelling they're telling, especially with the Kyber crystal necklace that Luthen gave. Oh, let's talk about Luthen for a second. Because I haven't talked about Luthen at all. It's called the Luthen Show. It's the Luther. So I think he's Jedi in hiding. Because a lot of the stuff that he had in his antiquity shop leaned towards Jedi stuff, or at least Jedi having. He was probably a archivist at the temple, was able to escape, or was off-world when it all happened. He knows what this stuff is. He knows the true value. He had a kyber like crystal that ties into legends and stuff.
Yeah.
And so in his walking stick looked very lightsabery when he showed up to kidnap to talk Cassian into joining him.
Well, and the kyber crystal is what makes the light blade part of a lightsaber, right? So if he took his kyber crystal out and is wearing it around his neck, then he could easily have the little stick part installed in his handle, and then it all doesn't go together, but it all actually goes together.
And the way his robes, when he's as Luthen, not the character of Luthen, when he's Luthen, I said in the first episode, or our first review, like, I really liked his outfit, but it felt very Jedi to me. Not as Jedi-ish as Mon Mothma's husband, who's setting up the dinner party, who's just trying to get her caught.
I know.
But he had a very Jedi kind of looking samurai, kind of formal samurai kind of. That's Jedi outfits are kind of based off of the formals,
right?
But so it kind of had that feel to it, like he was the style of the time was bringing back the style from before. But Luthen specifically, the way he knows stuff and the way he carries himself, even when he was walking as himself, he had this fighter ability, like walk to him. He was fine in the firefight. He didn't freak out.
Yeah.
You know, like it was just, there's just hints there where I think he's a former Jedi who worked in the archive or something along that line.
Yeah. So he would have been. That would have been what, like 10 years ago?
Yeah.
That Order 66 happened?
He would have been. I mean, if he's, I think Stellan's in his 60s.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he would have been in his.
Well, I'm just like, like how much time would have passed? Would it have been enough for him to have established this persona? But 10 years, I mean, that's probably...
That's a good... Yes. But there's other Jedi who had... Quinlan Voss was a really good... He was somebody who would go undercover a lot. And so he had a pre-existing setup of being somebody that wasn't a Jedi in the galaxy.
Right, I'm just thinking, like, Coruscant is pretty... You're in the heart of the Empire that, I don't think just, hi, I'm Bob, and I'd like to set up a shop and have senators, come visit me and be considered, a known, businessman or whatever. But 10 years is probably
it's
enough.
Totally it. He's also a Skrull, so
it's a different show.
So I'm loving this show. I'm loving this show. It's not what I expected at all, and yet it's still everything I expected. And Tony Gilroy is a liar. We're not going to have any Easter eggs. It's going to sit on its own. And no, you're just.
After what Ryan Reynolds pulled on the world yesterday, now you're mad because you were lied to again.
I'm not mad about that being lied to. I need a whiskey. Or 4. So let us know what you thought of our discussion reaction and our Luthen theory in the comments down below. Please be nice. That's a requirement around here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Follow us on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Links in the description down below. And until next time, cult members, good afternoon, good evening, and it's whiskey time.